Now we come to chapter 5, where we read of another king. This was the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar. His name was Belshazzar. And he was reigning along with his father Nabonidus. Nebuchadnezzar had died. 70 years had gone by. Daniel was now an 87-year-old man. And Belshazzar was the new king of Babylon. And he was reigning as the prince along with his father, joint ruler. And he's called here the king. And he had a great feast. I want to tell you something from history that was happening at this particular time. Outside the walls of Babylon, the Medo-Persian army had come to fight against Babylon, led by Cyrus and his uncle Darius. And Babylon was protected by these massive walls. But there was one weak spot in Babylon, and that was the river Euphrates that flowed right down the middle of the river. The middle of the city. But because that river was full, there was no possibility of anyone coming that way. There were gates that closed up the river, but they were open because the river was full. And history tells us that Cyrus thought of a brilliant scheme, and he dug another channel to divert the river Euphrates into another lake, to bypass Babylon. The result was the river dried up, and the Medo-Persian army entered and captured Babylon that night. And this chapter is referring to that particular night. Belshazzar the king, at a time when he should have been fasting and seeking God, he was feasting, like many Christians, and like the spirit of Babylon, feasting rather than fasting. For 1,000 of his nobles, and he was drinking wine in the presence of the 1,000. And Belshazzar tasted the wine. He gave orders to bring the gold and silver vessels, which Nebuchadnezzar his father had taken out of the temple from Jerusalem. And he ordered that the king, his nobles, his wives, concubines might drink from them. Then they brought the gold vessels, and they began to drink from them. And verse 4, they drank the wine and praised the gods of gold and silver and bronze and iron and wood and stone. They worshipped idols, and they worshipped their bellies. Suddenly, the fingers of a man's hand emerged, verse 5, and began writing opposite the lampstand on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the back of the hand that did the writing, and the king's face grew pale. That was the finger of God. Now I just want to mention here that there are only two places in the Bible where we read of the finger of God writing something. One is when God wrote the laws, the 10 Commandments, and 2 tablets of stone and gave it to Moses. You read of that in Exodus chapter 31 and also in Exodus chapter 34, because when Moses destroyed the first tablets of stone, God wrote it a second time. And the only other place where we see the finger of God writing something is here. It's significant. And this was to a heathen king. And the king's face grew pale, and his thoughts alarmed him, and his hip joints went slack, and his knees began knocking together. And the king called aloud. He was just like Nebuchadnezzar before his humbling. He called the magicians again. Imagine, here was this great man of God, Daniel, who had been there for 70 years, and this Belshazzar was such an ungodly person, he didn't even know of the existence of Daniel. He called all these wise men and said, if anyone can read this inscription and explain its interpretation. It was written in another script, something like the gift of tongues, and it needed to be interpreted like the gift of interpretation. He says, if anyone can do this, I'll clothe him with purple and give him various honors. And the king's wise men came, and of course they couldn't interpret it. They couldn't read it either. And then King Belshazzar was greatly alarmed, and his nobles were perplexed. And then the queen, that is the queen mother, the mother of Belshazzar, entered the banquet hall and said, O king, live forever, don't let your thoughts alarm you. There is a man in your kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. You see, the queen mother knew about Daniel. There is a man in your kingdom. You don't know about him. But he has illumination, insight, wisdom. And Nebuchadnezzar, your father, the king, appointed him chief of the magicians. Verse 12, because he had an extraordinary spirit, knowledge and insight, interpretation of dreams, explanation of enigmas, and solving of difficult problems. This is the mark of a man of wisdom, that he can solve difficult, practical problems that people are in. And the exact translation of the word there is a dissolver of knots. That means when you find your life is tied up in 101 knots, that the devil's tied around your life, a man of wisdom can untie those knots. That is a beautiful definition of wisdom. A man who can untie the knots that the devil's tied up in your life. This Daniel was brought before the king. Verse 13. Now, Daniel was now 87 years old. He was an old man. And Belshazzar didn't even know him. That shows what an ungodly person he was. And it shows another thing, that it's only when some problems arise that we appreciate the value of a true man of God. As long as we don't have problems, we are full of our own conceit and think we can handle everything. We're all right. We don't need anybody. We despise men of God, etc. And then problems come. And God humbles us. And then we are thankful if there's a man of wisdom around whom we can go to. Then we learn to appreciate. But blessed are those who don't have to wait till problems come before they appreciate men like Daniel. And he says to Daniel, I heard that the Spirit of the gods is in you. And if you can, verse 16, if you can read this inscription and make its interpretation known to me, you will be clothed with purple and wear a necklace of gold around your neck, and you will have authority as the third ruler of the kingdom. And I want you to notice something here in verse 17, which is the mark, another mark of a true man of God. Daniel says, you can keep your gifts for yourself. And you can give your rewards to somebody else. I want to tell you, brothers and sisters, in these days of tremendous deception, when so many people claim to have the gift of interpreting the handwriting of God, what is that? The gift of interpreting the scriptures. How to distinguish between the Babylonian magicians and the Daniels? Here is one good test. A Daniel will say, keep your gifts to yourself, brother, and give your honor to somebody else. I don't want it. I don't want your money. I don't want your honor. There are two things that Daniel refused. There were two things the king offered: money and honor. And those are the two things that are offered even today. And by this test, we can distinguish the Daniels from the Babylonian magicians. And if you keep this in mind, you will not be deceived by the Babylonian magicians, of which there are plenty in these days. Keep your gifts for yourself. And in his attitude to gifts, in his attitude to rewards, you discover the true man of God. Just like Abraham. You remember when the king of Sodom came to Abraham and said, here, take all these things, Genesis chapter 18. Abraham said, no, keep it. I'm not even going to take a shoelace from you. You remember Elisha, when another great man, Naaman, came before him and said, here is 8 lakhs rupees worth of gold and 10 fancy suits. And Elisha said, no, thank you. Keep it yourself. And so it is with Daniel. And I want you to see something here, brothers and sisters, that the services of a true man of God are always free. Any man who charges for his services is not a man of God. A man who says, I'll interpret the word of God for you, but you've got to pay me so much of a salary every month, he's not a man of God. He's a Babylonian magician, even if he calls himself a pastor or priest or whatever it is. A man who takes a salary is a Babylonian magician. If he says, I'll interpret the handwriting of God, but tell me what your salary is and how much the increment is. You see people like that? There are plenty of them. And yet, so blind is Babylonian Christianity today that even though these things are written so plainly in Scripture, they haven't seen it. God has blinded their eyes because they do not love the truth. That's the reason why the Apostle Paul refused to take a salary for his services. He trusted God to provide his needs. He was not going to get a salary for his services. He trusted God to supply his needs. And if Daniel had needs, he trusted God to supply them. But he was not going to take a charge for interpreting God's handwriting. And woe unto those who charge people for interpreting God's handwriting, whether on the wall or in the Bible.